Hey, all my Crimsonites, and welcome to the Crimson Cure channel, where we embrace our femininity, increase our womanly value, and celebrate our brothers. So join me on our feminine journey to learn, heal, and grow. Hey there, my Crimsonites, and welcome to the Crimson Cure channel. I'm your hostess, femininity coach, and author of the Crimson Cure, and this is my perspective. So here we are again with Miss Brittany Renner. Now, I spoke the very first time that it ever came to light that she, quote unquote, was trying to be Muslim. I had something to say about it. And when I heard her say, well, I took Shahada, that made me back off. I still had my thoughts, but I kept my thoughts more or less to myself in the interest of, because that's how I behave as a Muslim. Regardless of what I think other people's motives are, intent are, they moving funny, I try to keep my integrity as a Muslim in check. But there is a line, there's a thin line between keeping your opinion to yourself out of, you don't know what folks is doing, or whatever, but also speaking out against foolishness. And I speak out against foolishness, and this is foolishness right here. Because didn't I said this the first time that I ever spoke on her and the whole Muslim situation. I said it's okay if she wants to be a Muslim. Mashallah. That's wonderful that she wants to do that. But it also does not change past has been. It doesn't change people's perception of her. It doesn't necessarily make it better. She still has the identity that she cultivated for herself as an internet personality. Okay? People view her as a hoe because that's what she did. That's what she did. People didn't just call her that just because. Okay? She crafted that whole imagery and her own self-branding as that, and baby mamas and all the stuff all the antics that she has done publicly. And so I said, that's all fine and well, but usually when hoes want to reform, whether they go into Christianity, whether they call themselves converting to Islam, they usually fade out of the limelight because they're working on themselves. And that form of validation no longer is serving them, and it's not serving God, whom they are trying to get closer to. For example, back in like the 80s or whatever, Vanity was out, right? Apollonia and all them. So Vanity was this beautiful, super beautiful, woman. And she had that imagery too of this sex vixen. Her music was sex driven. Her lyrics were sex driven, all that kind of stuff. And eventually she faded out of the industry limelight, and to the point where people was asking, man, whatever happened to Vanity? And, she's passed away now, but she left, she went, back to the church and things of that nature. She ended up getting married, I think, to a pastor or something like that. And she faded out of the limelight. There was a porn star too that did it. What? I'm trying to think of this lady's name. I want to say it was Jasmine. I want to say something. It's probably a million Jasmines in porn, but whatever. But I remember that she did it. She faded out and she left the little, prawn industry, and she ended up going back to the church. So my point is, most of the times, again, when hoes want to reform, when you've been a public whore, sex worker, you've had that imagery, you've had that reputation attached to you firmly, and you no longer want that reputation. You are no longer living that lifestyle. You are no longer participating in that lifestyle. You come away from everything that was associated with that lifestyle. You don't do that anymore. You don't do that anymore. You don't. Because to go to dip, even to dibble and dabble in it, is to be tempted by it. And many times these types of women just completely go away. They completely leave the limelight. Now, their reputation, you can dig up an old porn movie with that woman in it. You can still go back and look at an old vanity video or whatever, but they did their best to distance themselves. It had been so long since you saw them publicly in that light. They completely lived a different life. They completely turned around and lived a different life. Miss Brittany didn't do that. And I watched that and I didn't think it was such a good idea. And now the fruition. Because if you, especially with Islam, if once you get convicted on deen, that's a different animal completely. Speaking as a person who had to accept Islam, I was not raised Muslim. So a person who searched for the truth, who ended up investigating all of these various different spiritual concepts, ideas, religions, whatever you want to call them, and being convicted by La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, being convicted by that, completely different animal. Completely different animal. And you don't become a perfect Muslim. That's not what happens to you. But what does happen to you is you become so convicted by it that if you were doing some real egregious stuff that is egregious really by anybody's standard, but especially Islamic standards, you pretty much cut that off immediately. That's got to stop. And it's got to stop. Like it's got to stop for real. Okay? Especially if whatever it was you was engaged in prior to being Muslim was public, like people knew about that. I'm not talking about your secret inner battles. I'm talking about the public foolishment. If you was involved in public foolishment, you really backing up off of that. You backing up. Because now I don't want to be seen as a Muslim doing this thing, because Muslims don't get caught up doing this thing publicly. They don't. They don't. They don't. Muslims may not be perfect. We sin. We do things that we don't have no business doing. But we also understand there's an image. We have a reputation. And you gonna publicly act right. You gonna act right. You gonna act right. I give you an example. And the men do it too. It's not even just for the women. It's for the men. I give you an example. Back in the day, back in the 90s, masjid on the west side of Chicago, masjid out. Them brothers was serious about deen and appearing to be good men, righteous men. And they didn't want nobody out of their ranks messing around in the neighborhood, making trouble, and it make all the other Muslims look crazy. So there was one particular guy. He was, he battled with drug addiction. So, the brothers try to help him, this and that. But problem was he was all around in front of the masjid, just all around the neighborhood, either nodding off or he started stealing from people, scamming from people, stealing from people, had folk looking for him, had, just trouble after trouble, trouble after trouble. He did not struggle with his addiction even in a like a dignified kind of way, even though the brothers was trying to help him and stuff. He wanted to cause trouble. And because he was causing trouble in the neighborhood, trying to steal from the drug dealers and all, causing trouble, it was the Muslim brothers that got him together. They was like, the thing that they said to him, they was like, you can't go around here nodding, trying to go into these dope houses and all that kind of stuff with your thobe on and your kufi on. No, if you gonna do all that, first off, you got to take that off. Take that off. You cannot misrepresent the Muslims because you got a problem. Because you have not beaten the addiction and because you're in the streets. If this is your test and you got to be in the street, we'll try to help you with that as much as possible. But at the same time, you're not going to be going around here dressed like a Muslim to the T at the dope spot. Like, we're not doing that with you. So now everybody looking at us like we dope fiends. No. Or that we tolerate the foolishness, that we condone the foolishness that you're getting up to as you try to quote unquote, on one hand, you want to be Muslim, on the other hand, you doing all this other stuff. So it wasn't just for the females to get in line. The brothers was keeping the other brothers in line. It's just certain stuff you're not going to do, especially, and the sisters would do it too. If you're going to be out here wilding, you got to take that hijab off. You got to take that off. Take that off. Go on, take that off. Take that overgarment, take that off. Because what you're not going to do is have everybody in the neighborhood thinking all the Muslim sisters is hoes. Because you want to go into all these illicit places and doing all these solicitous things, but you got a hijab on. No. No, ma'am. Now, if you battling something, we'll pray for you. But all that going around, you get up to every shenanigan, but you want to have a overgarment on girl. If you don't take that off. So this is what we was talking about. And in any case, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Jump down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe to the channel if you have not. Once again, I'm your host, the Crimson Cure, and this was my perspective. Bye-bye, Crimsonites.